Today, the Iran war hits the 6-month mark, despite the president's assurances the conflict would only take a few weeks. Why there are very few options left to end it. Then the president is choosing not to attend the 9/11 memorial services in New York at Ground Zero for the 25th anniversary. Plus, I'll talk to former Democratic Senator Doug Jones about his race for governor in Alabama, why he thinks he's got a chance in the ruby red state. Money, power, politics just getting underway on this Friday morning. Good morning once again. I am Stephanie Ruhle, joining you live from Times Square, where it is 9 a.m. on the East Coast and 6 a.m. out west. We are a mere 67 days away from the midterms, which means we are in the final sprint, and a lot of money is about to be spent. As we come on the air today, the United States is officially 6 months into this war with Iran with no clear way out. I'm thinking back those first 2 days, some of Trump's biggest backers on Wall Street said to me, 4 days, 5 days, a week and a half max. 6 months. That is where we are. Trump originally started the war to prevent Iran, he said, from having a nuclear weapon and to destroy its ability to attack its neighbors in the region. But at this point, it has developed into a stalemate over reopening the Strait of Hormuz, which was open, of course, before the war. 18 American service members have lost their lives in this war, while more than 750 others have been hurt, and thousands of Iranians have been killed. The war has cost tens of billions of dollars and sent the price of gas soaring, not to mention other goods that pass through the strait, like fertilizer and natural gas. American weapons stockpiles have been depleted, and our relationships with our allies have eroded. And as this stalemate drags on, do not forget Donald Trump's repeated claims about when the war would end. Watch.
Right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that. We'll do it.
We've won. Let me tell you, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over. But we won.
You know, I don't like to say this. We've won this. This war has been won. The only one that likes to keep it going is the fake news.
The war in Iran is going along swimmingly. We can do whatever we want. And it should be ending pretty soon. It was perfect. I mean, it's perfect. If you look at it, after a week and a half, not 4 weeks, a week and a half, 2 weeks, we stopped them from probably, but I don't want to have the word probably.
Very shortly it'll end, and the gasoline prices are going to go down like a rock.
I'm guessing right now you're screaming, shouting out your window, at your TV, at a friend. You're even hate texting right now. Don't. Take a deep breath. Let's get through this and send me your questions. What do you want to know about this war, about the midterms, about the economy, anything else? We're not going to scream. We're going to solve. Scan the QR code on your screen. Send us those questions. We will try to get to them later in the program. But for now, let's get smarter with the help of our leadoff panel. And you're in luck, because the one and only Jake Sherman is here, MS Now political contributor and co-founder of Punchbowl News. If you weren't sure where he worked, check out that sterling silver punchbowl right behind him. McKay Kaufman's staff writer at The Atlantic and an MS Now political contributor. Damian Pilato, Wall Street Journal's Washington coverage chief author of its political newsletter and Wake Forest dad. And Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, a retired commander of U.S. Army Europe and now an MS Now military analyst. General, you know we're turning to you first. The Council on Foreign Relations, not the fake news, says the U.S. has no good options left. Do you agree with that? And if so, can you explain why that is the case?
Well, I never want to say never having a good option. I'm first trying to figure out how you knew I was a Wake Forest dad. But what I'll say, Stephanie, is it has been troublesome the last 6 months. Every step that the administration has taken has brought more confusion, more chaos, and a little bit more dysfunction. I listened to a message from Admiral Brad Cooper last night, and he didn't reinforce what the president said about the Strait of Hormuz being open, but he did say they had established an ingress and an egress route, and they had conducted some counter-mine operations to make sure those small routes were secure. but the entire strait is not secure. And the other thing that is troublesome is Admiral Cooper did not talk about the length of the operation, which is going to be required unless some kind of solution comes to this war. You can't keep up these kind of things forever. We've been there 6 months. And, you know, going through your opening just now just reminded me of how many times the Russians, after they attacked Ukraine, said the war would be over in just a few weeks. And we're 4 years later on that as well. So this is problematic. I'm not going to say there's no solutions. I'm hoping some smart people in the administration understand that we have to synchronize the elements of national power and perhaps stop tweeting insults to the people of Iran and instead try a little bit honest diplomacy, but that remains to be seen.
McKay, Trump and his team started this war, repeatedly promising this wasn't going to be another aimless war in the Middle East. It's not going to drag on. Yet here we are.
Mm-hmm. It's incredible. I actually was just thinking about, like, 3 or 4 months ago, I had dinner in Washington with a group of people. It was journalists, foreign policy experts, people who are really kind of in the know in Trump's Washington. And somebody asked everybody to go around and make a prediction about when the war would end. And everybody at that table said Trump will find a way to get out by the end of the summer, not because he had some kind of huge, military strategy or, brilliant idea, but because he recognized that it was a massive political liability for him, right? That it's not just gas prices, that's certainly part of it, but there's also America's kind of psychic scars around the forever wars that defined the 21st century. He would find a way to get out. Everybody believed that. And it is incredible that we are here now as the summer ends, midterms approach. We're exactly where we were a few months ago, and there's no end in sight, as you pointed out, Stephanie. It's a case of Donald Trump kind of unlearning the political lessons that actually he intuitively grasped when he first started running for president, campaigning against forever wars. He's just kind of apparently lost those instincts and has dragged the country into another war that he has no way to get out of.
Damien, who I know to be a Wake Forest dad, I did not know that Mark was. Trump is about to be a true lame duck president. At this point, how likely is it that this war is going to completely overshadow his second term? Because it's like he's putting the war over here, and his main focus is continuing to get business deals done while he's in office. And as those are getting done, he doesn't feel lame at all. He feels rich.
I mean, I think if you look back at different presidencies, for George W. Bush, it was Hurricane Katrina that really began the end of his presidency and really sent his approval ratings down south. And for President Biden, it was the withdrawal from Afghanistan that really, he lost a lot of Americans' trust. And so I think when you look at this term, this decision he made to go in, he thought after Venezuela they could be in and out in a day. The same thing would happen with Iran. Obviously, that's not what happened here. I think there was a huge miscalculation. And now the White House has at least two huge problems. One, they've used so many munitions and missiles and interceptors in this war that it's created openings for Russia and China to look around the world and be more aggressive. And then we saw the CIA chief just go over to Russia this week to try to warn Russia not to try any funny business, but you know how those warnings don't often go very far. And the other thing, as McKay was just saying, gas prices is a huge problem. It might not matter the politics in Maine, Michigan, anywhere, when you have $4 a gallon gas. It's a huge headwind for Republicans all over the country. And so not only is this going to define President Trump's final 2 years in office, but it could really lead to a wave election in just 2 months that Republicans might never recover from.
General, what do you think about that, this quiet and extraordinary trip from our CIA director to Russia? I mean, almost feels like we're a little late to the punchline here.
Well, I think the intelligence agency is getting a whole bunch of information from various NATO countries that we've kind of given the stiff arm to. But the intelligence community is still searching after that kind of stuff, and they've received some information that caused some furor within those European countries. You just can't ignore that kind of stuff. And to prevent another war or prevent another expansionist approach by Russia, someone has to do something. This harkens back, remember when CIA Director Bill Burns went to Moscow right before, the few days before the February invasion of 2022 of Ukraine, and said, don't do it. I think Director Radcliffe is saying the same thing, but Putin doesn't have a whole lot of choices. He finds himself, interestingly, Stephanie, in the same situation as President Trump does. He can't end a war. And it's back to the military mantra of number one, the enemy always gets a vote. You've heard me say that before. And secondly, it's a whole lot easier to start a war than it is to end a war. And both President Trump and Mr. Putin are finding that out in real time. And it's unfortunate for both countries that they've had this kind of chaos and dysfunction in not only their planning, but their execution of combat.
Jake, amid all of this, Republicans have to spend the next 67 days campaigning. How are they doing that? How are they threading this needle that they need and must stand by Donald Trump, A, because he is the leader of the party, he has the war chest of campaign dollars to give, but he's presiding over a troubled economy and a war?
Well, and you saw, or at least I saw, but Mike Johnson was on the trail. He's on the trail constantly, but he was on the trail in South Texas this week. And he said, Donald Trump's on the ballot. Now, the idea there is to try to make sure that Donald Trump's voters, who typically do not come out for midterms, at least historically, they didn't in 2018 during Trump's first term, that they come out to the ballot box. But the risk there is that they do come out to the ballot box and they vote against Republicans. Because if you overlay this Congress with the war in Iran, you have a troubling picture for Republicans. You have a Republican Party that has not done what it indicated on cost, not done what it indicated on inflation. Healthcare costs are through the roof. And then you have a war in which you're spending billions and billions of dollars to prosecute the war, and you're not doing anything else about the actual concerns of Americans. And I think also you can't ignore the fact that most of the president, or a lot of the president's public proclamations, have nothing to do with anything that anyone cares about. No one cares if it's Lake Ontario or Lake America. I mean, no one cares about the ballroom. No one cares about revamping Washington, D.C. to make it prettier or whatever he's done. I mean, it's a nice thing, but I don't think most voters really care about that. So that picture is quite troubling. And again, overlay all of that with the idea that the president's party usually loses seats in the midterm of his term. So I mean, it's a really grim picture for the Republican Party right now, sitting here today on August 28th.
Okay, here's why it's a really grim picture, Jake. They never made a real effort to make the case for this war to the American people.
Never.
Even as the costs for consumers were rising. Why is that?
I don't know. And they never made the case to, you said the president has to, or members of Congress, Republican members of Congress have to stay close to Trump. He's not given them any reason to be honest with you. They've not been forthcoming about why they're engaged in this war. They didn't see Congress's role as necessary. They didn't make the case, or at least a fulsome case, about why they were taking this action to an American public that is bone tired of wars. And by the way, that's how Donald Trump won the White House, at least in part, because he also expressed that he was bone tired of endless conflicts, and now has gotten us into a conflict that may not be endless, but the end has not come quite yet. I don't know why he's not made that case. Perhaps it's messaging discipline. I don't know the answer to that, but he's stuck with it now, and that's something that Republicans have to live with.
Bone tired and out of supplies, General. It seems like every week there's new reporting out there. Not that we're hearing it from the Pentagon or the White House, reporting that's showing how this war has drained both the military's budget and its weapons stockpiles. How has it changed our readiness for other potential conflicts? Because as we said in the beginning, you've got China, you've got Russia, you've got so many other hotspots around the world that are looking at our vulnerabilities and wondering how they might pounce.
Yeah, Jake triggered me when he just said that, because That's a recurring mantra about being bone tired of the war. You know who else is bone tired of the war? Not just the weapon systems that the soldiers are using, but the sailors that are on board those ships for the last 12 months without a direction. And we're starting to see that. And that is the most influential aspect of readiness, Stephanie. You can have all the high-tech equipment that you need and well-maintained ships, which currently we don't have. But as soon as you start losing the morale and an understanding of the truth for what they're fighting for, it's that connection once again. This is concerning to me, but because not only is it affecting the individual soldier and their leaders with some of the policies that the Department of Defense has come up with, but it's also showing our allies, first of all, that we don't trust them, or that at least we don't want to be allies with them. But secondly, it's showing our foes that we are distracted. I mean, if we're just looking at Iran, or maybe even Iran plus Ukraine, you don't get a full picture of what is facing the war planners, the contingency planners inside the Pentagon with what they're tracking in other area of operations, like the South China Sea, when you take an aircraft carrier away from that area, like South Korea, when you see the president partnering up with the North Korean leader and canceling exercise. Like, I mean, I could go on in terms of how it's affecting the rest of the globe while we're focused on Iran. But I got to tell you, you can pull anybody off of the Joint Staff and they will tell you exactly that. And evidently that message is not getting to Secretary Hegseth or the President of the United States. We are in much graver danger for an attack of some type, both conventional or asymmetric, than we were 2 years ago.
A deep breath is required. Jake Sherman, thank you for starting us off. Damian, Mark, please stick with us. Coming up, exactly 2 weeks from today, the nation will mark 25 years since the 9/11 attacks. The president planned to be at Ground Zero for the anniversary, but after finding out no speeches would be permitted, he changed his plans. He will be the only living president not in attendance. And remember, Money Power Politics is coming to you live. Our first live audience show slated for Thursday, September 17th at CNBC World Headquarters in Englewood, New Jersey. I'd love to see you there. Just scan the QR code on your screen. Sign up for a chance to get a ticket. It is going to be a good time. Money Power Politics is back in just 90 seconds. It is quickly becoming one of the most complicated and sophisticated stories of the 2026 midterms. I am definitively confused by it more and more each day. There's been another twist in Trump's push to upend mail-in voting. Last night, a federal judge once again banned the plan to use the Postal Service to restrict voting by mail. Joining me now, former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance. She spent 25 years as a federal prosecutor. Please lay this out for us. What exactly happened last night and what's going to happen moving forward?
Well, Judge Talwani in Boston put a new temporary injunction in place telling the administration it couldn't go ahead and implement Trump's executive order or the Postal Service's new final rule. But, Steph, if we cut to the chase on what's happening here, it's really appalling because the government, which has all along been arguing this isn't ripe for a court to make a decision about, we haven't taken sufficient steps towards implementing Trump's executive order on mail-in voting, now they're arguing, suddenly it's too late. And because the appellate courts won't be able to complete their review, the courts can't consider the final rule that the Postal Service is using. You know, this is just playing with Americans' right to vote. Judge Talwani had no trouble slapping it down and entering a new temporary injunction. We'll see, because this is headed back to the Supreme Court.
Joyce, thank you. Also, 2 weeks from today, I can't believe it's been 25 years. For every New Yorker, we remember it like it was yesterday. 2 years from today, we'll be marking 25 years since the 9/11 attacks on our country. The New York Times reports President Donald Trump will not be at the Ground Zero Memorial here in New York City. Instead, he will mark the occasion at the Pentagon. That is according to 4 people with knowledge of the events. In part, it is because the president wanted to give a speech, but politicians have been barred from speaking there since 2012. In response to the Times story, the White House spokesperson did not address the president's plans for that day. McKay, Damian, and General Hertling are back with us. General, you served in Iraq in the aftermath of 9/11. What do you make of the memorial holding fast its policy to keep this event non-political?
Yeah, and I was in the Pentagon on 9/11 too, Stephanie. It was my only tour in the Pentagon. What I'm saying is keeping this event non-political is the only way to go. This was an event that affected all of Americans. You can't have a right or a left approach to commemorating the 9/11 attack. That's something that also drew the nation together. And that's something we need now more than ever, someone to unite the country, to quit this divisiveness that we've had. When you talk about not attending an event at one location because you're not being able to give a speech and attending at another, the Pentagon was also attacked, the rationale for that is not about the commemoration of the event. It's whether or not you're going to give a speech. I teach executive presence within a business school today. And presence has to do with how you are seen, but also where you place yourself. It's important where the leader of an organization is. And I think 9/11 is certainly something that affected both the Pentagon and New York City. But I think the world sees the New York location as the much more important one. And in my view, that's where the president should be, whether or not he's given a speech.
This is the 25th anniversary. Former presidents, Obama, Bush, Clinton, they're all going to be at Ground Zero, Damien. And New York is Donald Trump's hometown. He was in the city when it happened. Why do you think he's not going?
I mean, I was just thinking about the logistics of that week are going to be very strange. So we have the Republican convention, midterm convention in Dallas on the 9th and the 10th, where the president's going to be. And then right after September 11th, which I anticipate to be a very heavy day for Americans. I think as the general was saying, I mean, and you were saying, 25 years, it's going to really hit home the impact of that day and how it changed the country forever. Right after 9/11, he's going to fly to Ireland to go to his golf course. So he's got like this oddly very packed schedule that he's sort of shoehorning 9/11 in the middle of, and I think it's going to be kind of a big distraction, whereas maybe in a more normal setting, that day would have its own kind of week and special commemoration in the way that maybe other countries would handle it. So it's going to be kind of a confusing week. For some reason, he's decided he's going to zig while the rest of the country's focused on New York, and maybe it'll give him a chance to give a big speech, and he'll have the Pentagon behind him, and that'll be the optics that he's looking for. But it might also not play well. And given the way things are going right now at the White House, that's a risk I don't know if they want to take.
It was this truly awful day, but to the general's point, it was a day that then brought this country and especially New Yorkers together. McKay, what are your thoughts?
It's interesting. You can go look up clips of Donald Trump talking about 9/11 in past interviews. He was in the city when it happened. And in some of those interviews, some of those speeches, he actually, talks very personally and in a way that is not self-aggrandizing, not about himself. It's about his city, about his hometown. I don't know if that version of Donald Trump still exists, if he's capable of talking about anything without making about himself. I hope he does. I hope that he can channel that kind of energy, that part of himself, if he does give a speech at the Pentagon, because that is a day for all Americans. Like you said, it's going to be a heavy day. It's going to be a difficult day. And it's a day when the president needs to be the president, not, a self-promoter.
But let's be clear, he was also self-promoting at the time. He quickly was trying to label that his buildings would now be the tallest buildings in New York City, and he was misidentifying or telling mistruths, saying that he saw people from foreign countries cheering on roofs of buildings on the other side of the Hudson River, neither of which were true. Gentlemen, thank you for starting us off this morning. Coming up later in the show, a rematch. Democrat Doug Jones and Republican Tommy Tuberville are facing off again. This time it's for Alabama governor. Why Doug Jones thinks he can flip the state blue. But first, right after the break, we're getting down to business. In anticipation of the high-stakes meeting in Jackson Hole, Kevin Warsh is gearing up for his first speech there as Fed chair. And the question on everybody's mind, will he stay cryptic in his plans to tackle this stubborn and problematic inflation? More Money, Power, Politics. Let's get down to business. In the next hour, Kevin Warsh is set to deliver his first major speech as a Federal Reserve chairperson at an annual conference in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Investors are waiting to hear how he plans to tackle inflation as the president's trade war with Canada and a military war with Iran are both driving up prices. Joining me now to discuss, Catherine Rampell, MS Now analyst and economics editor for The Bulwark, and my dear friend Brendan Greeley, contributing editor for the Financial Times. Mr. Greeley, soon to be Dr. Greeley. Kevin Warsh has been very vague by design about his plans to lower inflation. What are you expecting to hear from him today? Because his last presser did not go so well.
Yeah, we need to set the stage a bit. The speech is a really big deal. The Jackson Hole speech, the first one for a Fed chair, is like a dead ball, right? It's his way of introducing himself not just to national markets, but to global markets. And the challenge for Kevin Warsh right now is he's trying to change everything all at once. He wants to change the way the Fed responds to inflation. He wants to change Fed tools. He wants to change the way the Fed communicates. And the real problem he's faced with is a very old problem, and it's not the one he's set out to fix, which is markets don't believe him. So his choice to not communicate his intentions accidentally communicated to markets that he's not serious about inflation. And we're seeing the results of that in the 10-year, in the 30-year. Things are becoming more expensive, and it's getting more expensive for the United States to borrow.
Catherine, you wrote a piece, an opinion piece in the New York Times that I devoured because I agree with it, arguing that Wall Street, that was really happy about Scott Bessent and Kevin Warsh in the early days, they are losing faith in these two men.
Yeah, look, everybody else in this administration came out of the clown car, right? These are people plucked out of Fox News green rooms and Trump's own personal legal team. But these two guys were supposed to be serious people. They were people that the markets trusted, and they were chosen because the markets trusted them. They have relatively traditional CVs. They both worked for legendary investor Stan Druckenmiller, who I know you've talked about quite a bit recently on your show. They're serious people. The problem is Bessent in particular has not been acting like a serious person. I think he kind of shot his credibility almost immediately in some of the actions that he took early on when he got confirmed, when he basically invited Doge goons in to have unprecedented access to the Treasury payment system. But then on top of that, you have his messing with Treasury markets quite recently, which has unfortunately somewhat backfired. He's been trying to bring down long-term Treasury rates, and instead, they went up, in part because the action itself looked so feckless. Now you have Kevin Warsh, as Brendan points out, in this difficult position where not only does he have to articulate, or he's supposed to articulate anyway, how the Fed will tackle inflation, he also has to articulate why the Treasury is honing in on the Fed's turf and doing what it's trying to do to lower at least long-term interest rates. So, markets, I think, have maybe have relatively low expectations today for what Kevin Warsh can actually deliver, given the how daunting those set of tasks are. But Warsh really needs to prove that he's his own man, that the Fed is independent, that it has a strategy for inflation, and that it's not getting rolled essentially by Donald Trump and by the other serious person that Donald Trump appointed, Scott Bessent.
Well, perhaps that Stan Druckenmiller op-ed, Catherine, gave Kevin Warsh a little air cover to stand up and be more independent, because from the market's perspective, it was humiliating for Bessent to have that op-ed penned. Brendan, today we are now marking 6 months since the war in Iran started. Oil prices are up 25%. We know gas prices are up a ton. Moody's Analytics has estimated that families are paying $1,200 more because of this war. Do you see this changing anytime soon, especially before the midterms?
No, and one of the reasons why is Moody's had to estimate that. We don't know how much the war has cost. We've got wildly differing estimates. And so normally we know this kind of information, and the Pentagon's been pretty tight-lipped about what it's costing, both in terms of people who have died and in terms of what it is that we've paid. The United States has gotten used to not having to think about how it pays for war. World War I, World War II, we really had to do a lot of work to figure out how are we going to finance this thing. By the time of global war on terror, all we did was just borrow more. So nobody had to make any sacrifices. I think one of the things that's happening right now is it's not just that we're looking at this cost of the war, which is still uncertain, and what American families are bearing every day with the cost of the war, it's that all of the sudden, and I'm sure Catherine has had this experience too, people in Washington are starting to recognize that there may be something they have to do about the debt. And that is because borrowing costs are going up. And Washington is never going to do anything until it really starts to feel the bite of figuring out how to pay for things. It hasn't had to think about how to pay for things in 40 years.
Yeah, we've been saying that year after year, and no one wants to touch it. The president is trying to lower beef prices by lifting tariffs on foreign imports. Catherine, is that going to work for us at the grocery store? Because we certainly know it is not working for the American cattle rancher.
The thing I love about this is that the president is coming so very close to acknowledging that tariffs raise prices, right? Like if he just thinks a little bit harder about why the reduction in tariffs is maybe going to reduce prices, and it may or may not, depending on the volume of imports that we actually get here, maybe, just maybe, he could come to the correct conclusion that his broader tariff agenda is raising prices. In this particular case, I don't know how big of a difference it's going to make. There are a lot of reasons why beef prices are so high right now. It has to do with drought. It has to do with screwworm. It has to do with the fact mostly that cattle herds are at I don't know what it is, 50 or 70-year lows at this point. And it just, cows don't have that many baby cows that frequently. So it's really hard to get those herd levels up. So there are a lot of factors going against the president here. I think on the margin, this will help. But in terms of putting a dent in the broader affordability problem, I think it's not going to make a huge difference.
All right, I don't have much time, but I'm not letting you leave without asking this, because we talk a ton or we ask the question, is this White House for sale? And we focus on how much money the Trump family is making during this second term. The New York Times has some reporting that back in March, Don Jr., who is not part of the administration, told a group of Republican states attorneys general, why was he even in that conversation to begin with, that they should not go after prediction markets. This man is an advisor/investor in the two biggest ones, Kalshi and Polymarket. I can't even get my head around this.
I mean, one way to think about this, oh, sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
No.
Go ahead, Brent.
I mean, one way to think about this, Grift, is that crypto is banking and finance without regulation. And what we have with prediction markets is gambling without regulation. And that's one thing that the states, even Republican-led states, want to keep a tight lid on. They both know that gambling is an incredibly important source of revenue. They also know that it's dangerous if it's misused. Both of those things are true, and that's known everywhere in America. So the state's attorney general of these states are not wrong to say, hey, this is our job to manage gambling in our states. We need the revenue and we need to protect our citizens. The thing that's so fascinating about the Trump family is that they seem to have honed in on both of these things we understand but are now calling by a new name. And the only thing that's different is there's no regulation, which means it's really easy to slide in there and figure out the grift.
And something people might not be aware of. At the same time, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that an Abu Dhabi royal, who is known as the Spy Sheik, who already invested a ton of money in Trump's crypto business, World Liberty Financial, is looking to invest even more as they're trying to turn World Liberty Financial into a bank, and it would make him the largest shareholder. If you do not see the looting of our government happening right before our eyes, well, then splash some cold water on your face. It's happening, and it matters. Thank you both for being here. When we return, they were once rivals for Alabama's Senate seat. Now they are both gunning for the governor's mansion. Democrat Doug Jones joins me to talk about his rematch with Tommy Tuberville. You are watching Money Power Politics.
Record of which that makes much sense for Alabama. He is really one of the 90-pound weaklings in the Senate when it comes to Donald Trump. Deferring to him consistently, even on all of the tariffs and inflation and everything else that you've heard about. None of his proposals make any sense because they are just culture war proposals and not based in reality. I've got a record. We've got a plan. We're talking to people every day. And that's going to make the difference in this race, how we're getting out talking to the people of Alabama. And he's riding around talking to Chat GPT and making speeches only at the chambers of commerce.
The last time Alabama, though, elected a Democratic governor, that was back in 1999. Bill Clinton was the president. Our nation has done almost a 180 politically since then. What is your message to voters now? People who have not been in the Democrats' camp for 30 years, people who are watching TV and hearing that Democrats are super far left, democratic socialists, and how those democratic socialists are even being defined on the political ads in your home state doesn't even have a connection to who they really are.
Yeah, you know, look, people in Alabama know me. That's the advantage I've got. They know I'm not a socialist. They know I'm not a communist. It is just silly. I mean, when I was in the United States Senate, I got awards from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for being bipartisan and protecting the free enterprise system. People remember that. They didn't agree with every vote that I took, but they know me. They know what I've done over the years as U.S. attorney and as U.S. senator. But they also see and hear the just kind of crazy things that Donald Trump and Tommy Tuberville, who is enabling him, are saying. Your last segment was perfect. Talking about tariffs, talking about inflation. Donald Trump's tariff policies are killing Alabama right now. They're hurting the cattle farmers. They're hurting our manufacturing. What does Tuberville say? He just writes it off, or he doesn't say anything about it because he is just taking a knee to Donald Trump. These people are hurting. And he doesn't understand tariffs. He doesn't understand anything that was just talked about, and blames inflation on 40 million illegal immigrants. Okay? 40 million, number one, is absurd. Illegal immigration is absurd. So people see that in Tommy Tuberville. And I'll tell you, Stephanie, and you and I have talked about this, this whole data center issue is a big deal in Alabama. It's a big deal across the country. Tuberville is all in. He has said, we're going to do them. It doesn't matter. The concerns of communities are bullcrap, in his words. And we're trying to be very reasonable and talking to people about the concerns that they have about the building of the data centers, whether it's power, whether it is their electricity, their water, and just their overall quality of life when these monstrosities go up in their neighborhoods. That's the difference in this race. And that's why we are talking to people. And the last thing, this is a change election. We have seen them before in the past. This is going to be a change election. People are fed up with both parties, and they're looking for candidates who are going to effectuate that change. And that's what we're offering right now.
Doug Jones, thank you for joining me this morning. And to Senator Tuberville and his team, they're welcome to join me for an interview any day next week. When we return, Trump, he's the map maker. At least that's his new gig, how he is making waves. You know, I said I wasn't going to cover this. I said it was nonsense, but guess what? It's not going away. He wants to rename yet another body of water. You're watching Money, Power, Politics, and I'd like to know, you can tweet it to me, send it to me on Instagram during the commercial break. Who are the American voters who are asking him to rename Lake Ontario? I'd love to know who they are. So this week, we all watched the U.S. trade war with Canada escalate to the point where negotiations collapsed and were replaced by angry words and new tariffs from both sides. Now President Trump has taken things to an absurd level, making good on a threat to rename Lake Ontario. Yesterday, he signed an executive order in the Oval Office renaming it Lake America. This is not the first time we have seen the president do this. It's a nonsensical distraction to take us away from major things like the war, like the economy. But it appears that he thinks that renaming a body of water is just a matter of making a simple adjustment on a map, just busting out that old Sharpie. Watch this.
This follows the president's executive order issuing a name change from the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
And we're flying right over it right now.
Attention on board. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please direct your attention out the right side of the aircraft. Air Force One is currently in international waters, the first time in history flying over the recently renamed Gulf of America.
All it takes is a good pen and some intelligence. So Lake Ontario, that's gone. Lake America. We have a Gulf and we have a lake. Now all we need is an ocean. So maybe we'll have to change the name of the Atlantic and or the Pacific. Maybe we'll change them both.
We also cannot forget back in 2019 when Donald Trump tried to change the path of Hurricane Dorian. Change the path, again, by just using a Sharpie on a map. But for fact's sake, you cannot just rename an entity after our country by just adjusting a map. Yes, domestically, the president can decide to change the name of whatever he wants. That change would then have to be recognized by the U.S. Board of Geographic Names. But there is zero obligation by Canada or the international community to honor the name change. I've yet to see American people who are begging for this or even asking for it, and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has insisted it will still be known as Lake Ontario up north. When we return, we enter the group chat. Max Chapkin, Mark McKinnon, Max Rose, all standing by. Keep it here. These boys have a lot to say. Get pumped. We have an exciting hour ahead. It is 10 a.m. on the East Coast, 7 a.m. out west. I am Stephanie Ruhle. Welcome back to the second hour of Money, Power, Politics. You know what time it is. Time for the group chat. And today, the U.S. war with Iran has officially reached the 6-month mark. In that time, negotiations to end the conflict have broken down again and again, with each side caught in a cycle of broken truces and retaliatory strikes. What initially began as a targeted operation to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, according to the president, that became about regime change, and it is now largely focused on the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which, of course, was open before the war began. President Donald Trump has repeatedly claimed that the strait is open. Watch what he said just yesterday.
We don't want to speak to them. We're not looking to meet or anything. The strait is open. We're taking a lot of boats. Millions and millions of barrels of oil are coming out of the strait every day. Other countries recognize that. Every once in a while they shoot some, they put some shots at. We totally cleared the strait of, we have the best minesweepers in the world, the underwater minesweepers. And we've totally cleared the strait of mines. And we're watching very closely through Space Force.
What other countries recognize that? Because for fact's sake, we deserve a reality check. According to Reuters, 10 commercial vessels made it through the Strait of Hormuz yesterday. That is up from 8 on Tuesday. That's positive. Prior to the start of the war, on average, 130 ships transit the shipping channel every single day. So it is far, 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 far from open. Let's enter the group chat. Nayyera Haq joins us, former White House Senior Director and State Department Senior Advisor. Mark McKinnon is here, former advisor to George W. Bush and John McCain, and the creator of The Circus on HBO. Max Chapkin is here, journalist for Bloomberg Business Week and host of Bloomberg's Everybody's Business podcast. And Max Rose, former Democratic New York Congressman and Senior Advisor to the very important organization Vote Vets. Nayyera, what is your read on this conflict now that we are officially 6 months in?
Well, it certainly wasn't quickly done in 4 days, not in a few weeks. As you're 6 months in, we still do not have a message to the American public of what's been gained. As you mentioned, Steph, we're trying to reopen something that was already open. The only people who've really benefited from the U.S. attacks on Iran are Russia, that got its sanctions lifted so that they could be sending more oil to make up for what's been blocked with this war in Iran. China, which is now taking advantage of the U.S. distraction by targeting vessels and engaging further in Asia. And even North Korea is now taking advantage of this because Trump suddenly decided that South Korea wasn't involved enough in Iran. And so he's not supporting South Korea. North Korea is now launching missiles. It's all the bad actors in the world have benefited. Iran, still a bad actor, has not ended its nuclear program, has not eliminated any of the uranium or any of the enriched material that they had. And the regime has only tightened its control and become younger and more creative about their survival.
And Max, we still don't know what the U.S.'s goals are here. I mean, what must that be like for the military serving overseas?
I think they've broken the trust and the commitment that the military's leadership and the government's leadership makes to these service members who sign on the dotted line, taking an oath that they are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. Well, let's look at what was happening before the war in Iran kicked off. Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth were firing generals and senior military officials left and right whenever they sought to express any opinion that was divergent from theirs. And so what you did in that process was created a military leadership that was unwilling or hesitant at the very least to do what they are supposed to do, which is express independent, expert military guidance. And so we rush into this war with Iran, not thinking about when they shut down the Strait of Hormuz, not thinking about when they bomb all of our regional military bases. And that's why, in part, we're in this quagmire.
Do you think our global standing is weakened?
Oh, no question. And I mean, when you look back on this, they were so high on their own supply after Venezuela. Pete Hegseth and Bibi Netanyahu got in Trump's ear and just said, this will be easy. We can go in and get out, within 4 to 6 weeks.
And by the way, Bibi has been looking for a president who would do this for years.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Took advantage, played him. And to your point, think about not only what have we not gained, but what have we lost through this? I mean, the Strait of Hormuz, now that's all we're talking about. Iran has never won a war, but never lost a negotiation. So here we are. But in terms of the global power dynamic, Iran is in a much more powerful position globally, economically, politically than it's ever been in its history right now. It has more leverage than it ever had before.
I want to stay on that very point. Think about the position Iran is in today on the world stage, stronger than ever before.
Yeah, well, we've moved to where our best case scenario is sort of getting back to where things were before, which is opening the Strait of Hormuz. And even that feels like it's going to be tough. Iran has said it's going to charge sort of best cases where ships are going to be paying, tolls to Iran. The U.S. military is going to be spending a lot of money just to get crude oil through. And the thing that strikes me in watching that clip of Donald Trump is that we've been seeing this play out over and over again since this war began, where the Trump administration says we've won the war, the Strait of Hormuz is open, the oil's coming through. And it's easy to claim that, but anyone who's watching it knows it's not true, because you can just go outside and go to your nearest gas station and see the gas price.
But it's not easy to claim that, because as soon as he claims it, he gets dunked on by the American consumer, the media, and even lawmakers.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, the gas prices are what they are. And so you kind of can't, talk your way out of this one.
Now, Yaira, the latest U.S. strategy is stricter sanctions, even though that doesn't make sense, because you would have gone with sort of strict economic sanctions before war. They've done the reverse. But even what they're doing, Scott Bessent is calling it economic D-Day. We're still looking for when that day is beginning.
Right. They didn't bother to coordinate in advance with any of our allies or anybody else to make sure that these sanctions would have a direct impact on the Iranian regime. So, okay, 60 individuals, many of whom had already been sanctioned. Iran as a country has been sanctioned back to the 1980s, right? I mean, this is Bush 1 policy towards Iran. And it's the idea that sanctions would suddenly change the mindset of the regime because their people were suffering. That's not how the regime or autocrats work. They clearly have operated without caring if their people are economically suffering for this long. And this is also part of why, Trump having lifted the sanctions on Russia has been problematic. Russia shares information, shares technology with Iran. So Putin gets a gift. Iran is still able to evade the sanctions. We have the U.S. Treasury talking about an economic D-Day with no details and no actual reality and coordination behind it. It is entirely smoke and mirrors, even to the point of saying that the Strait of Hormuz is open. We have a naval blockade. The U.S. Navy is blocking the Strait of Hormuz. So how is that at all, if any of this meet reality?
And you know what they have? You know what the Iranian regime has? A calendar. And they know when the midterms are. You think they're going to do anything before the midterms?
This is an excellent point. The administration's plan is to do what they do best, distract. Where they're going to distract with, now we're going to call it the Lake of America, now we're going to try to get into culture wars. They cannot do that. As long as there is a free press covering this war every day, as long as the war persists and it's causing more and more things across this country to cost more money, as long as we have a military in this country, military families saying, what in the hell are our sons and daughters doing there? This White House cannot simply put it in the rearview mirror. Trust me, they try. Every Wall Street source I've spoken to in the last 6 months loves to be like, oh, that war, it's over, it's not really happening, and then they point to the stock market, which is up. The stock market is one measure, and that one measure is really looking not even at Fortune 500 companies. It's really looking at 7 massive AI companies that valuations are to the moon and beyond. Can they really just say, we're going to distract the American people away from even knowing that there's a war going on?
When was the last time the Trump team won an election when they had power? Never happened, right? 2018, 2020, 2026, I think we're going to see a tremendous rout. And so what this speaks to on a larger basis is their politics. You know, they like to run against things and complain. It's one of the reasons why I think it's such a big mistake for Democrats to think that, oh, wokeness was the problem, right? That it was all just, how we spoke and how they came after us. What we need to constantly be highlighting is these folks are incapable of governing. They're not capable of it. They can say the right thing, we're against forever wars, we're going to lower costs. When they have power, they do exactly the opposite. And now they're trying to distract, but those tools work when you're not in power. When you can complain about somebody else.
But they are trying to change the information that we get about this, too. And, for example, the Stars and Stripes newspaper.
Yes.
They've gone after people who are writing the truth there, Max. So you're from the military, so talk about Stars and Stripes and its impact.
Yeah, look, I think that the thing with Stars and Stripes that hurts, I don't know one service member who's like, I get all my information from Stars and Stripes only, right?
But it's important.
No, and I'll speak to why it's important. It's important because, one, is a point of pride, intense pride, and two, it is a point of information that service members get that speaks in their voice and in a manner that crafts the story in a way that speaks to them. And in the absence of that, I think it's a big.
But they're also seen as so patriotic, and so for the Trump administration to be like taking on an organization that's seen as so yes sir, no sir.
Yeah, I honestly, and I might get in trouble for saying this, Stars and Stripes does not fall in my top 10.
Well, that's that makes my point.
But listen, even if it doesn't,
that's making my point.
If the administration is willing to go after Stars and Stripes, then they are willing to go after your top 10. And isn't it crucial for the American people, specifically people in the military community, to know what the hell is going on?
If I have the opportunity to speak about the military, I would prefer to talk about the service members who lost their lives in this conflict that should have never been waged. I prefer to talk about the military bases that have been destroyed. I prefer to talk about what happened to the naval headquarters in Bahrain that led to the Lincoln being out at sea for so long and service members being extraordinarily mistreated. That's what I want to talk about. I really care a lot less whether or not a newspaper is in business or not. I want these service members treated right.
Naira?
I totally agree with Max on that, about the stories and about the quality of life and the experiences of our men and women in the armed forces are not getting told. But the Pentagon has also, under Hegseth, made sure that the policies, the decision-making, that story is also not being told and not transparent. No Pentagon press briefings, right? They got rid of access for the major newspapers, the major media, to actually even have conversations to understand. Like, we're talking in every other war the United States has been engaged in, from Vietnam to Afghanistan, we have had explosive news that has come out of the Pentagon Press Corps or access to the decision makers so that the American public understands why we are at war. So not only is the president not explaining why we are at war in Iran, they are also making sure that other people are not able to figure out what is going on and share that with the American public.
But Max, to your point, it was the conditions on the USS Lincoln that Stars and Stripes was reporting on that the reporter got fired for.
Sure, and that's absolutely wrong. I'm not defending this. But this whole conversation began with the ways in which this administration will seek to distract people from the core problems that are occurring, right?
Sure. And part of the distraction is making sure people don't hear the truth.
Yes. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to tell even more of the truth. Don't go anywhere, just 90 seconds.
Keeps things moving. Tadalafil keeps things going.